Assalamualaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. My name is Radai and I'm Thought Therapy here on Instagram. I have a Master's in Psychology of Mental Health and I'm a Crisis Outreach Worker for Mind, which is a nationwide mental health charity here in the UK. So as we know, mental health has had a huge impact from the pandemic, and COVID-19 has changed the way that we view not only our well-being, but also the way that we view normality. Last year, Ramadan was in lockdown, and that was a very new experience for all of us. And as the restrictions are beginning to lift here in the UK, as well as in other places around the world, globally we are still doing Ramadan in very uncertain and difficult times. And it's during these stressful times that we need to be thinking about the way that we treat others and the way that we treat ourselves. So let's break this down. Stress can impact us in two main ways, physically and mentally. So we might experience tense muscles, a dry mouth, our heart racing. We might start to feel more angry and irritable quite quickly. We might start to feel drained and lethargic. And all of these signs indicate that we have high levels of stress. Now, when we go through these things, it can be really difficult to manage. But the question is, how do we measure stress and how do we know our capacity? So psychologists have been leaning towards an analogy called the stress bucket. And essentially, if we imagine that we have a bucket which holds all of our stress, no matter how big or small. So these could be friendships, relationships, it could be work, uni, family, finances, and everything coming into our bucket is like pouring water into the bucket. Now, naturally, things may overflow. But if we were to pierce holes into our bucket, the water would release. So, for example, this may be through things like socialising with friends and family, having a hobby, exercising, spending time with friends and family, doing anything which you enjoy and gives you some self-care time and some me time to really boost your energy. Now, if we imagine that these holes are puncturing our stress bucket, no matter how much water flows in, we can manage it and the water will never really overflow. But remember, it's easier said than done, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed sometimes. And naturally, during this pandemic, it can happen more often than we realise. Things have changed, people are doing things differently, we're running our lives very differently to 2019. But it's how we check in with ourselves and it's how we look at our mental health that matters the most. So if you imagine that these holes that are piercing our stress bucket are actually helping us, they're helping us to build internal and external resilience. And research has shown that when we have increased mental health and positive mental health, it helps our physical health too. Now, mindfulness plays a huge part in this. What is mindfulness? So mindfulness is that active remembering and appreciation of our thoughts and our feelings and checking in with ourselves to appreciate how are we feeling? What does this situation mean to me? And how can I take steps going forward? So you could do this by journaling, by doing dua, connecting with God, and that's exactly what Ramadan is about. But you can also do this by writing down your thoughts and your feelings, by appreciating and checking in with yourself more consciously. You can use a time scale and use a 1 to 10 marker by saying to yourself, okay, if 1 means that I'm feeling really low right now, I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's too much. And 10 is I'm feeling okay, I'm coping, and I'm actually enjoying myself and having a good time. Now, on day to day, that number may fluctuate. Sometimes you may feel like a 3, and sometimes you may feel like you're doing okay and you're more of a 7 or an 8. But understanding why you've picked that number and how that number can improve can help you check in and improve yourself going forward. Now, sometimes when our stress bucket gets filled up too much, it can overflow, even if we do have those holes punctured. And that's normal too. It's okay to feel overwhelmed and it's okay to feel overburdened, especially during these difficult times. Now, this may be in the form of panic attacks or anxiety attacks, or generally you may just feel like you just can't cope anymore. Now, during these times, we need to ground ourselves and we need to find a way of distracting ourselves from our negative thoughts and finding ways to ground ourselves and reflect on the present moment. So how can we do that? So essentially, there are many grounding techniques which can be used, and one of them is the 5 things for your 5 senses. So essentially, you count down from 5, finding 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, and so on and so forth. By doing that, you're taking yourself away from those negative thoughts and focusing on something in the present. You're looking around for these things. You may need to move around and, find things to hear, smell, and taste. But you're going out of your comfort zone to say, okay, I need to calm my body down. I need to distract myself. Another method is also the breathing techniques, which I know a lot of you may have heard of. So you breathe in for 5, hold for 5, and breathe out for 5. Again, that number may vary. If your lungs aren't as strong, you may only feel that you can do it at a 3. And if you can hold your breath for longer, that's great. And you can do it for a 7. It doesn't matter. The number is not the priority. The priority is that you're focusing on your breathing and focusing on the present and taking yourself away from those stressful thoughts. Now, it's a really good question to ask yourself. What is in your stress bucket? What are your methods of stress relief? Now, remember, everyone's buckets are different shapes and sizes, and that indicates that everyone has a different capacity to cope, and that's okay. So remember, always be kind and compassionate, because you never know what someone may be going through.